Hey, welcome in, Bonnie. Cloud Dragon, good to see you. Jimmy, so glad you could make it too.
Hello.
Hey, we'll get started in just thanks for the backflip. Yeah, we'll get started in just a moment here. I forgot to charge my controllers, so I'm kind of getting used to I have one of them plugged in. I'm trying to make sure I have enough slack so I don't accidentally knock things off my desk.
Good evening, ma'am.
Hello. Oh, Tom's here.
Hello there, hey. KT.
Hey, Tom.
Hi, KT. Hey, welcome. Tom,
Hey, Scott.
thanks for coming.
Jeffrey.
Let's see. We got 8:03. So I think it's a good time to jump in. So welcome to another event of Body Keeps the Score, our ongoing book review of the book with the same title. We're on chapter 8. And as always, I just want to send a big thanks out to everybody that's taken the time to be here and continue the discussions. It's so fun to do this as a group, and we couldn't do that if we didn't get together as a group. So thanks for setting aside time on our Thursday night here to come and create such a rich discussion around the book. Something I've always wanted to do, and you're helping make that happen, so I appreciate it. And to start our event off, we just like to cover some of the norms for the etiquette and values that we have when we meet up and talk about sensitive topics. And first of which is, we're a peer-to-peer exploration group of wellness topics, but we're not replacement for therapy. We really recommend that if you are looking for guidance and life-altering advice, do that through professional counseling. We might discuss some things we've learned or have tried ourselves, but you always want some kind of professional guidance if you're going to practice. And please know, fixing and advising, there might be some shares, maybe things that people might even share for the very first time in a group setting. So what we want to do is leave space for that and not try to jump in and say, I know exactly what you need to do, because that can be really discouraging if you're, just starting to think about something, to kind of have to accept all of this feedback, even though it's well intended, that's not the thing. It is, the intention is there and it's good. It's just nice to give that stuff some space, so that somebody can, begin the practice of asking for help and telling people. So we want to just create that room for that to happen. However, if you do have something that you want to not only share but would like feedback, please just ask the group. Hey, I would be interested in hearing if anybody else has faced this. Feel free to ask. I and you statement hygiene is also really important. Sometimes when you say something like, I heard you say this, or you said this even more directly, but, kind of softening that with what I think I heard you say, or, I think I heard and understood it this way. That can really soften things when we're talking about sensitivity. Also, confidentiality, we're not a gossip group. We're not going to take this information and go somewhere and tell, people, oh, you heard what so-and-so said. That's not what we're about at all. We do just want to keep in mind that we are streaming, so anything that is shared in the group, will be on the YouTube and the Discord channel. So just be mindful of that, and share if you're comfortable, with it being a little bit more public. We have a hand raise feature to help facilitate group discussion, kind of first come, first serve, first in, first out. And you can operate that by clicking the squirrel up top. And we also have the X button if, you change your mind. Maybe the topic's changed or you change your mind, that you can take your name off the board too, because we don't hold anybody or, sharing is organic. You want to share, we won't try to pull it out. I must have went backwards there. And also there's an ongoing open discussion in the Bridgemakers Discord. So the Bridgemakers group that's in YouTube and also on Discord, where this event is hosted, has a chat channel for weekly discussion and updates. So we meet on Thursday night, but we also have like an ongoing kind of chat discussion on the Bridgemakers Discord that's open to feedback, fun posts, questions, shares, all of the above. And with that, anybody that's joined us on the streaming side and the YouTube or the Discord channel, feel free to leave a comment in chat. I might not notice it right away, but we do catch any questions that come up in chat or comments, and we really enjoy hearing from our streaming audience as well. So let's dive into Chapter 8. Oh wow, Chapter 8 is really where this book dives in. Chapters 1 through 7 really prepared us for a lot of tools to kind of understand what Chapter 8 really has to say. And I have not actually gotten this far in the book yet, so we're in unread territory for myself. So I've read this chapter for the very first time, and I'm kind of reacting for the very first time, and it's a heartbreaker. This chapter is a really stark reminder of the pitfalls that you can fall into, without any control of your own or any say of your own, in this world. Kind of the birth lottery, so to speak. And we're going to get into some really sensitive stories, which is good, because I think what we're trying to create here is a brave space to explore these topics and create an atmosphere where we can acknowledge that these things do happen, and the science and the research about not only how it happens, but what the repercussions are, and maybe hopefully even treatments, how to navigate out of this kind of a situation and feeling. So we are going to start with a story about one of Dr. van der Kolk's patients, Marilyn, and I suspect Marilyn, may not really fully exist as a person. This may be a conglomeration of situations that Dr. van der Kolk has put together, to protect people's identities. So, kind of keeping that in mind, these are the kinds of stories and situations that are coming to Dr. van der Kolk throughout his career. He's connecting with people who have been, through the worst of the worst, so much so that they've begun just struggling to function in society. So, here we have Marilyn, who reaches out to Dr. van der Kolk, and she describes the situation where through a work relationship, they started to get to know each other and play tennis and exercise together. And, a couple young, attractive, successful, couple that are attracted to each other, they kind of explore it further and further, and eventually end up, in an intimate situation where, they ultimately, end up, asleep together. And in this moment, where they're in bed fast asleep, the man rolls over and he touches Marilyn, and Marilyn's body just reacts, and she's biting and punching and yelling, and of course her partner there has really no idea what's going on and kind of ultimately leaves. And then Marilyn's left with this mystery of, where does all of this keep coming from? How do I keep ending up here? And she shares other stories about suddenly coming to, like, cowering in a corner of her apartment and, like, not even really having a recollection of how it happened, how she got there. We talked about this, I think, in chapter 2 or chapter 3, the habit of self-injury to kind of, as a cure for this numbness that you can feel if you've been in a shutdown, traumatic state for long enough. Sometimes, human behavior, you can resort to self-injury to sort of just feel something. And she had that behavior in those stories. And, ultimately she shared with Dr. Vanderkolk that the only time she really felt like she was living her life was when she was working and when playing tennis. And that makes sense, because sometimes when we cope, we immerse ourselves in some kind of busyness, and the ultimate, like, consumption of all your attention in problem solving or some type of activity can really distract your mind from this, like, feeling that we're trying to avoid. So in Dr. Vanderkolk's, very experienced, practice as someone that treats trauma, he recognizes that there's more to this story, but, that she may not really have a complete recollection or an ability to face, what has occurred. So he invites her to draw this drawing. Because she starts to tell Dr. Vanderkolk, like, I must have had a happy childhood, but she couldn't remember anything before the age of 12. And she shared with him that she ran away from home at 16 and ultimately put herself through nursing school. So she was able to reach a stage in life where she could support herself. But when invited to draw a picture, she draws this nightmarish image of a child like tied down in this kind of cage-like atmosphere, and surrounded by these kind of monstrous, nightmarish figures. And even what looks like unmistakably this kind of, like, phallic symbol that's invading her space. And, one of the tragedies of this kind of state of being is, like, think of what must have occurred, like, in your life to conjure, like, a drawing like this when you're in your, like, mid-30s, kind of prime in your life, like, successful job, holding down a career, supporting yourself, and then this drawing comes out of you. And, this is a person that accomplished putting themselves through nursing school after running away from home. And, that's the tragedy to me, is, like, imagine what their life, could be like without this enormous weight that was put on them, when they were a child. Like, what could a person that still managed to sew a life together after this horrendous experience, what could they do with those roadblocks removed? And I think that's where Dr. Vanderkolk emphasizes so many times in this book is that he does this so that we can find a pathway where this no longer happens. And I fully, support his work and that endeavor. And he said, what makes this so hard to talk about and so hard to come out is that truth, like love and sleep, resent approaches that are too intense. If the truth is too intense, sometimes it's really hard to get it out. So Dr. Vanderkolk recognized that this was a situation where needed to go really slow. And what he did was he introduced Marilyn to a group support group, that talked about these histories of childhood sexual abuse and incest. And he found that, Marilyn was really uncomfortable at first. She was, physically, you could tell that she was scared to be there. But Dr. Vanderkolk helped set some boundaries, like what would be good to talk about, or, maybe it's good to just kind of listen. And, we'll find out like a little bit later in the presentation where we talk about it more is the numbness of shoving those feelings down and like the invalidation, that you would get throughout your lifetime of what you've been facing, and just trying to, make friends and have relationships and not being able to like divulge this, what's kind of going on internally. Eventually that all coalesces into this kind of pressure cooker type situation. So, you can imagine what Marilyn's carrying around, and when she does get in a situation where it triggers this kind of eruption, it is like an explosion. So I think Dr. Vanderkolk recognizes that, and he really tries to ease the sharing in a much more kind of safe and slow pace, so that way you're not just kind of setting off this emotional bomb of, forcing it all to come out at once. So I thought chapter 8 was like a really interesting sort of approach, that if you've been through something so horrendous that it's kind of pushed down into the territory of not even really having a recollection of what happened, or just, whenever you think about it, you push it away so fast you sort of forget like what it even was. Like chapter 8 is almost like a play-by-play in like how to approach getting help, like a professional like Dr. Vanderkolk that recognizes like the steps to ease into, finding out what it was, like relearning what happened. So I thought that group support was really genius on Dr. Vanderkolk's part. And Marilyn started sharing with Dr. Vanderkolk that she was starting to get clumsy and like bump into things. She had physical bruises that showed that she had like fallen down. And she was complaining that her tennis game was really suffering because she felt she couldn't really see the ball well. And Dr. Vanderkolk at first thought this could be what's called a conversion reaction, where a trauma can be so bad that it comes out in like paralysis or blindness or the inability to smell. It's like this really weird symptoms that have no explanation. There's lots of documentation about it happening like in combat situations. So this is where that's like, it's all in your head kind of comes from, is doctors think trauma can manifest in these like physical symptoms. But thankfully, Dr. Vanderkolk didn't do that. And he really explored, what was it that was happening with the eyesight. And it turned out that she had lupus erythematosus, which is the the body's immune system kind of attacks the retina, and she needed like immediate treatment or really even like risked blindness. And this is another area where Dr. van der Kolk sort of hints at what I think he's going to cover in some of the later chapters, which is there a connection between trauma and autoimmune diseases like lupus? So to kind of explore that idea that can trauma like trigger the development of autoimmune type diseases and illnesses, he got a study going, which was 12 women with really terrible incest trauma, like we find out Marilyn has, and 12 baseline women without trauma that were also not taking any medication. And Dr. van der Kolk went like another step further with that. And he said it was really hard to find 12 women that not only didn't have trauma, but were not on medication. And I think it's like these little tidbits that he shares, which kind of underscore like how widespread, childhood trauma like really is in the world. I think a lot of the statistics, show much more than people would fill out on a survey. If you ask people how much trauma is there in the world, I think it would be grossly understated. And I think that's an example of it. But what they studied in these 24 women is there's these cells in our body called CD45 cells. And they're related to how our body responds to like foreign invaders. And there's two types. There's like RA and RO cells, CD45 cells. So what happens is like, let's say you breathe in some mold or something in the spring, and you have the quintessential like allergic reaction. Your nose starts running. What's happening there is the CD45 cells are engaging these foreign bodies in your system, and the RA cells are the ones that recognize things. So RA are like the pre-programmed reactions to stimulus that you've already faced. So if a foreign invader comes in and your body's like, I've seen this before, it sends the RA cells that it's already prepared against that, foreign invader. And this is how things like allergy shots work, is you get like this tiny dose of something that's not going to give you a big allergic reaction. It's just going to give your body the opportunity to turn these RO cells into the experienced RA cells. And the more of these RA cells you build, like the more your defenses rise to this kind of allergic reaction. So our bodies have these RA cells, and then the RO cells are like the unprogrammed ones that are just waiting, in the wings for their chance to fight something. So if you ever face something new, that's when the RO cells go out and say, now it's our turn to find out what's going on and see if we can get rid of, whatever's invading our body. And there's a health measure, a health metric, which is the RA to RO ratio, which is how many of your body's cells are already pre-programmed to fight, outside influences, and how many of these RO cells are just kind of waiting and available for new things we face. And I think you can kind of see where the study's going is that the population of women in the study that did face incest had these really out of character RA to RO cell ratios where their RA cells were like off the charts. Their body had like fought everything under the sun, and it had all these pre-programmed CD45 cells just waiting, entrenched for things to attack. And what happens in this circumstance is these RA45 cells, sometimes they get things wrong. If you have so many of them in your body, almost anything can trigger them. And this is when your autoimmune functions of your body actually turn on the body itself. And these CD45 RA cells can actually, misinterpret your skin or your eyes, your kidney, and actually start attacking it like it's a foreign body. So this over kind of overstuffed situation where your CD45 cells have all flipped to the RA switch, it puts you at really high risk of developing these autoimmune diseases, much like Marilyn faced the retinal lupus, and actually was at risk of losing her eyesight. So, we talked about this connection between the mind and the body, and being triggered and having a feeling, of being unsafe. This is a study that shows that the body, actually is unsafe. The trauma has manifested in a way that the body even starts seeing itself as a threat. So I really hope that more and more research goes into these autoimmune diseases, because if we're able to treat the root cause, which is these kind of unprocessed emotions that get trapped in the body and continually put us in these fight or flight states, the earlier we can recognize and treat that, how many of these autoimmune connections could we possibly prevent for people? So how does one sort of end up in and stay in these abusive situations? And I thought Dr. van der Kolk had an interesting way of describing it, which is that, loved and supported children that we talked about with secure attachment, like children that become securely attached, they have this sort of internal map. And what happens is, they went through a lifetime of support and love and presence. And when somebody comes into their life that is a really negative or toxic influence, or even mistreats them, they react to that because it's so out of the ordinary. It doesn't match their internal relational map. So they immediately recognize that this person is harmful to me, and would take steps, to get help, or, if they have the wherewithal to just, not include that person in their life anymore. The important message there being that they would not allow that person to continue to influence their life. On the flip side of that, when you have somebody who's been neglected, abused, their map, it includes, that primary caregivers in my life are also abusive. So when somebody else comes into their life that is abusive, it's not really seen as out of the ordinary, right? This is just how the world works. And here comes, another dose of it. So I think it's important to recognize that difference in attachment styles, that securely attached children, grow up into adults that recognize toxic behavior and can either, kind of push back against it or get themselves out of harmful situations, where, insecurely attached adults can sort of not recognize or have these, misconstrued feelings of deserving being in harmful relationships. And he brings up this really interesting anecdote, which was somebody in their group therapy group had this behavior that we had talked about earlier in the events, that this constant apologizing and accepting blame for things that clearly just aren't their fault. No way it could have been avoided, or not even something worth apologizing for. And one of the group members that had this behavior described the incest as like their fault. Like they really like loved their parent, and they were just trying to make sure, they were responsive to show, the love to their parent, and taking that blame and then really like apologizing for their own abuse. And Dr. Vanderkolk, kind of put a stop to it and said, what we really need to recognize here is that it was the adult's responsibility to set the boundary between parent and child. It's really the adult's fault. They're the ones that's in the wrong. And this is where a really unexpected turn in that conversation happened, where she really read Dr. Vanderkolk the Riot Act and said, I know I'm being irrational, but this is the way that I need to communicate right now. Like I don't have the rational part, down yet to not feel the blame and the sorry. So when you tell me not to feel sorry, it's like it just adds another layer of difficulty. And, Dr. Vanderkolk was really humble in this situation and said, she taught me a lesson, because I was sort of in this kind of fixing, hero mode of, telling somebody how to feel. And she explained back to him that I really need to feel the way I feel, or it's just yet another barrier towards the path of healing. So these kind of feedback loops for people that have trauma, like stop apologizing or be more positive. that one's my favorite. I think cognitive behavioral therapy sort of falls into that trap a little bit. Like I think there's like a gray area where cognitive behavioral therapy like is a pathway to sort of change like how you react to daily situations, but I think it can be misinterpreted as just think positively, which is the sort of counterproductive message to that. And, it wasn't your fault. Sometimes people aren't ready to hear that as well, especially when it's a parent, because parents are cornerstones and paragons in our life. And for us to exercise blame towards a parent can sometimes feel like a betrayal, like even though that parent did some of the most harmful things imaginable. Sometimes it's really hard to reconcile the feelings, and it can feel like a betrayal to blame a parent for something. So as you can see, the difficulties in navigating this, why it's so beneficial to do it with peers who understand and have been through it, but also with professional guidance like Dr. Vanderkolk. So I wish I remembered what I was trying to say with my last sentence there, so I apologize. But it's kind of this dichotomy of mutually exclusive emotions. Like you can't hate and love at the same time. And I think you can. And I think it's important when you're going through like a healing process to start allowing yourself to feel mutually exclusive and even like what might feel like hypocritical emotions, because those are emotions that are coming directly out of our bodies that are really having difficulty being expressed because we push them down or we distract ourselves away from feeling it. Those emotions are coming up for a reason. And I think part of the healing process is giving ourselves permission to validate that emotion. That emotion is seeking validation, and that's why it keeps arising. So another thing a professional can really help navigate is difficult emotions that don't feel like they make any sense. And, ultimately, this is kind of the life that Marilyn is thrown into, is that, the ultimate betrayal of a parent like that, creates this internal map that every single pathway leads to terror. And the irrationality of navigating life with that map, that no matter what stimulus you are, that goes in as input, ultimately outputs as pure terror. And that's one of the reasons that these bodies really start breaking down. And, another just paramount reason to see if you can find a pathway to help. Because I think, as Dr. van der Kolk points out in the book, that there are treatments if you can, find the right environment that feels safe and the right person to help guide. I always say that finding a counselor is kind of like dating, which it's probably not the right way to put it. But what I mean by that is you have to keep trying and experiencing. Like if you go to one counselor and that counselor just does not connect with you, or you don't agree with what they say, or it just doesn't feel right and productive, that's a sign to try like another counselor. Like, not to give up, because all counselors have different backgrounds and different approaches. So that's what I mean when I say like dating. Don't just go on one date. See who's out there and who feels right. And this is what counseling can also help do, is create this, not only a safe place for these stories and these emotions, but like the professional like understanding of how to receive these stories, telling some things to friends or family members, sometimes they don't understand, or, sometimes they might even react in a way that makes you feel judged, or tell you like, I don't ever want to hear about this again. So what's important in the counseling process is you have somebody that's going to be able to validate that not only did this happen to you, but, all of these feelings that you've turned off, like, let's explore, like, turning them on, like, one at a time. And, this dormant ability to feel anger for, decades of your life. Like, what happens when we start turning, like, anger on a little bit? And, what happens when you touch sadness? Like, you haven't really, you drink yourself into a blackout drunk state just to avoid feeling the grief. What happens if you just face it for a moment, and how do you step into it? So this was one of the really, I almost think kind of the saddest point in the book, which is, as Dr. van der Kolk explains during one of their group sessions, another group member named Mary was sharing this story about horrendous abuse, multiple family members being tied down and actually forcibly being made to have an abortion. As this story was coming out, one of the first times that Marilyn shared, in the group at all, one of the very first times she said, hearing that story, I wonder if I may have been abused myself. And like Dr. van der Kolk said, he had to really work to not like let his jaw hit the floor, because to him it was obvious, what had happened. But Marilyn's coping with this horrendous family background was so intense that there was a disconnection between the body and the mind. The body remembered everything, but the mind had coped its way like away from it. So, just kind of going through the motions in this numb state of mind, with the body having nowhere to put this experience and kind of process it out into the open. So this is what counselors will call dissociation, which is the ability of the mind to completely like detach from the body and ultimately start kind of living in two different experiences. One which is the survival mode of trying to maintain cognitive function and navigate through the daily challenges of just making ends meet and putting food on the table, and the other, the body carrying the weight of this like unreconciled, unvalidated experience, and being able to live these two experiences simultaneously is a process called dissociation. And this is what Marilyn was struggling with, is carrying this horrendous childhood experience for so long. The mind and body had completely disconnected to the point where the body had this experience that the mind had no narrative for. So it was like feeling terrified of something you don't even remember happening. So this was the challenge of the treatment and the pathway to healing here was to kind of reconnect the mind and the body and unifying that feeling once again. And so after the group therapy started going better, where there was more sharing and more participation, that Marilyn felt comfortable with the group, Dr. Vanderkolk pulled the individual back into individual therapy. So now back in the room, one-on-one with Dr. Vanderkolk. And he described this as acute experiences of pure terror. So for the first time, this deeply repressed experience and emotion was actually coming out like in front of somebody in an intentional and in an intentional way. And the way that Dr. Vanderkolk experienced this is acute experience of pure terror. It's almost the language of like the SpaceX like unscheduled disassembly, for the spaceship exploded. I imagine that Dr. Vanderkolk might have seen some actual emotional explosions and, had the ability to sort of defuse and navigate those situations. But, that's the thing like really professional, good counselors can do is navigate these emotions that are almost impossible to have, on our own, because they can be very destructive and energetic. But to have that with a trusted person in a validated setting, finally, for the very first time in Marilyn's life, she's able to start letting this emotion surface and be validated that it happened and it was horrible and it was undeserving, and to kind of unwind and be seen. So that's the kind of the pathway to recovery. We're talking about one of, in my opinion, like is one of the top traumatic experiences in life. If you think of combat veterans and the tours of duty and what's seen in that time period, and you kind of also weigh that against a childhood with a parent who's chronically abusing you, either physically or emotionally. I think it's one of the top traumatic experiences in life because, parents are, you don't have any choice, right? You're born to who you're born to. And, a 6-year-old can't leave home and get an apartment somewhere. You're completely dependent on the person that's abusing you. And you get these biological ties too. Like we're wired to seek a caregiver when we're a child. And when that person is also the person that's causing harm, I just think it has to be one of the most difficult things to unwind in life. And I thought this chapter did an amazing job kind of painting the picture that, first Marilyn really recognized that I'm having adverse experiences and I would like to, seek a different way. Having the bravery to reach out and start getting counseling. And then accepting a group support, being afraid of it, but, committing to the process, trusting the process, and then the individual counseling. Those appointments couldn't have been easy, to actually face it and let out those emotions that are so overwhelming, they shut down for a lifetime. And then finally, ultimately, what healing really does ultimately come to is like the permission for the body to tell its story. This story that we've dissociated from for survival, to finally open the door for the body to take the stage and, let it come out in whatever language it chooses. And it takes a lot of courage to feel that. I tell you what, flicking on a Netflix movie or YouTube or having a drink or going to the gym to run 3 miles on the treadmill, like these things are all so much easier than just setting aside time to be still and actually let this come up. And really connect with your body and hear its story. But it's so important if there is trauma, if there is a trauma and it's there, it's really so rewarding to touch it and to seek help and to find the techniques. Dr. Vanderkolk taught Marilyn breathing exercises, and it sounds trite to say. Like, I get it. Like, I faced abuse, from my parent, before I was even old enough to ride roller coasters. And I'm getting taught breathing exercises. I mean, it sounds trite. But what it opens the door to is like, finding ways to settle the body, which we talked about with mindfulness techniques and the acupuncture pressure points, just to take the edge off of letting these things come out in the individual therapy. He taught these techniques, when it really starts to feel like you feel the overwhelm coming, do the acupuncture tapping or take a few sessions of box breathing before you open it back up. So, wonderful guidance, again, by Dr. Vanderkolk there. So really this is kind of the anatomy of where a dissociative lifestyle comes from is, as an example, this chronic sadistic abuse from like a family member, but also no help, right? So in Marilyn's story, she did go to her mom and, it's really easy to judge the mom because the mom turned her away. But her mom was probably in the same exact situation, right? Like she was probably, learned that kind of like that learned helplessness that we talked about. If every pathway to, challenging her family led to, consequences that were too difficult to overcome, her mother was also helpless. So I know it's easy to judge, but it was probably a difficult situation for everybody who was being abused. But, the ultimate consequence, though, is that it was no help. Marilyn learned that there's nowhere she can go to get away from this. And that imprints on a young mind as this map that Dr. Vanderkolk talks about, this map where every road leads to terror. Turning to alcohol and exercise and work, like all of these things to sort of consume the cognitive side of our mind, away from the feeling. And this can really manifest in a more simple way than these tasks. Is like anytime the feeling comes up, you're seeking a distraction. What can I do to stop this feeling from welling up? Or you can have the sensation of actually pushing the feeling, like I like to describe it as down, like sort of back into your stomach. There's this one scene in this movie called Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, which is just a wildly kind of surreal movie, but I enjoyed it. And there's this sort of masculine figure that's a police officer, and something happens where he sheds a tear, like it's like he was moved by something, and a tear comes out. And he's like, "Get back in there, tear." And he literally like sucks the tear back in. Like it's like this animated character, and he pulls the tear like back inside. But that's the process, right? Like a feeling that you just feel is inconvenient and I don't want to feel it right now. And you physically force your body to not feel it. And what it does is it builds that pressure cooker. And, we're talking about the opportunity for that to happen over decades. So you can imagine, like the kind of the type of pressure that can build. And ultimately what the body does is when it goes into shutdown, for that long of a period of time, and it realizes that, the cognitive side of my cognitive partner has just checked out on me, that's when the dissociation happens, and the body just comes completely secondary to everything, and you sort of just live in this sort of like cognitive, intellectual state to be productive and survive. Letting the body sort of carry the weight for us. And, over time, just the fight or flight, the constant numbness, that's where we see the opportunity for these kind of autoimmune, these unexplainable like autoimmune disorders that seem to be common with traumatic experiencing. So what do we kind of take away from this? Lots of powerful messages in Chapter 8, even though it's exploring some of the darkest experiences in human behavior. I ultimately think we come away with a message of hope, because someone who has been through it, found a pathway to true help, like really, really and truly somebody that helped. And there's a drawing that was made by one of the other young ladies in the study, where she explained that she was seeing herself, up on the ceiling, as these horrendous acts were taking place. Like she was actually having an out-of-body experience where she was on the ceiling, like watching it happen. And she even described it as like, I'm glad that that's not happening to me. That's how powerful the mind can be as a survival strategy. And Chapter 8 reminds us that this happens, and it happens way, way more often than it deserves to. And, next time we see somebody explode in public, was that someone that is living this nightmare? Have you ever been on a date and somebody explodes for no reason? It's not excusing it. Like don't get the wrong idea. I'm not saying like it's excusable to be rude or belligerent, aggressive. But, somebody throws a fit at a work meeting, or, the next time you pass a homeless person. I always think this when I drive by somebody with a sign, or, sleeping under an overpass. Is that somebody who, their family just abandoned and abused, and now they have like no one to turn to in life, and just end up completely and utterly and helplessly alone. So this is that kind of what's wrong with you versus what happened to you, methodology is, I really think Dr. van der Kolk uncovers the importance of the experience, that trauma is an experience-oriented challenge and not something that is wrong with the person. It's something that needs to be unwound and validated and supported. So the inspiration for the day, I have kind of a double one here. I think it takes sort of two, which is it's an act of bravery to feel your feelings. And I think we saw that from Marilyn in the book here, that she had the courage to start feeling, what happened. And but also, like, on the flip side of this, we also heard from the other lady in the group therapy, the group therapy there, that, she needed to accept blame and apologize because that's where she was in the process. So, it's okay if you need distractions. Sometimes feeling is too much. Especially if you don't have the right support, it might not be the right time. You might not be in the right place with the right people to help. So, play that video game, watch that episode on Netflix, like, survive until you can find the safe place to feel that feeling. So, don't let avoidance of feeling become yet another feeling of shame or regret, because that just adds to the pile. So, keep in mind to give yourself some space if you do find yourself in an avoidance pattern, and you don't feel the energy or that the timing is right or the opportunity, to kind of rise and summon the courage to dive into a traumatic experience, by all means, keep surviving, because like Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, keep going, because eventually finding the space to let the healing happen, that's where we ultimately want to get. And sometimes coping is the best we can do until we can find that. So yeah, two inspirations that sort of have mixed messages, but I think apply, to different phases of facing trauma. And yeah, with that, let's go ahead and take things to open discussion. We have the hand raise board, and we also have the stream going with the chat. So if anybody's in stream and would like to make a comment, we're watching for comments as well. But yeah, I don't see any hand raises right off the bat, and I don't want to pull any comments. But I do see Ruth has a hand up, so yeah, take us away, Ruth. Let me get you the camera there.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you. I maybe it's a misread, but I could tell that there were tender moments as you described, and felt myself mirroring that and welling up with you and telling these really just horrific stories, and what that does to people, changes their lenses. I also just want to, there's so much here, but there's a moment a few slides ago where you showed this art piece of hovering up above yeah. So I don't remember the type of art. Maybe it's listed in the book that's called. Did it list what kind of art this is?
Oh, if it did, I missed it. Yeah.
I don't think it did. I only know this because of a social worker, a friend of mine who became a social worker for hospice, actually. And she specialized in this kind of art. And it's a really interesting form of art therapy, because it's not like with a pen or pencil or whatever. There's actually ink that is rolled on a flat panel, and she does it with different colors of ink, and then a very delicate kind of piece of paper is lined up over it, kind of like parchment paper. And then you actually touch the paper to create this art. And she had also had a very abusive past. But when she discovered this particular kind of art, she was able to tell her stories of her spirit and her essence in a way that felt really spiritual to her and healing, to like be able to see herself through this image by just letting her hands kind of guide her. And she made, a whole series of greeting cards out of it. And it was this archetypal journey for her to like show herself that she was still alive, even through the trauma she had gone through. And there's a specific pattern in this that made me remember this from a long time ago. And so I think just like, there are so many horrible concoctions of trauma, I appreciate how you were able to honor that, we want to blame the parents. We want to like find the villain in this situation, but there's just this cascading generational trauma that often sets these kinds of storms up that really break somebody early in their life. And I think that this art allows the softest touch of remembering one's creativity.
Yeah, I felt like it was such a genius like communication method for the way Dr. Vanderkolk approached the situation. Was like, it's really obvious that the verbal like discussion isn't going to steer itself like where we need to share. So to like introduce this completely like new and not like kind of an unorthodox way of like telling your story. I find it amazing, like how the very first drawing Marilyn made was like the like full story, like almost everything that she could have said over months of therapy was like in this picture tells 1,000 words.
Well, and such a brilliant example of the body keeping the score. And like one of the ways that I learned to build relationship differently with food was to stop like having a fork and spoon for a while. I learned this was my Portland woo-woo days, but I learned how to eat food, even lettuce and salad and whatever, with my hands. And that contact point of, and I was taught by Ayurvedic doctors that like the oil off of the hands is actually really important for the digestive process. But we wash all of that off and we have this hygiene piece, and we're breaking a cycle of being contactful with what we're consuming by putting this metal object there. And I think about the pen or pencil or art pieces and how many of us have experienced traumas with that bridge. And so, being able to just touch something and be able to feel the images start to emerge is such a gentle bar to build that bridge from. And the most hopeful thing I see in this art piece is actually the line between the body on the ground and the cloud in the sky. That, to me, from my history and training, is the hope. The hope is that it's connected. If it was disconnected, this would be a much more disturbing art piece, even just by a thread.
Yeah.
I just love that, with your, the experience, that you bring, like, that's a realization I didn't connect, like, myself, that there was still a tether. It's really emotional to see
it
that.
Makes all the difference to realize that. And hopefully this was brought out, but when somebody sees that, and my guess is, I don't know this, but my guess is that's the very last thing that was drawn, was that line. And that is the bridge of healing. The bridge of healing is, I remember I'm still that body, even if it's just by this one little thread. And this is where I used to do a lot of teaching on conscious dissociation. Psychopathology really reams dissociation as a sign of trauma. And so then people are always shaming themselves for disassociating from their bodies. And when I was working in inpatient psychiatry, I started to realize, like, so everybody's disassociating from trauma, from the medications they're on, from overwhelm, whatever. Like, what do we do to, like, catch that train that's always leaving our body and turn it around, return trip? Like, we have to actually sometimes let ourselves go to bring ourselves back. That's like a meditation piece. So I think there's something so lovely. This is one of the best evidence pieces I think you've shown of the body keeps the score. The moment you allow the body to just touch a piece of paper and see itself and what happened to it emerge, now the link is brought back.
Yeah, giving the body the voice, in this blank canvas, literally, for it to speak, and and I find like intentionality is like a really important component, because some of the experiences we read about here was like a lifetime of dissociating from like the body's pain, so that the brain, and logically and intelligently and rightfully so, like finds ways to survive. And just doesn't have the capacity yet to pull the body, back in. But as you're going through these experiences now, like the intentionality of like, I do want to reconnect with your body, you can start recognizing like the dissociative patterns where like, oh, I just had a feeling and I felt myself like push it away. So like the intentionality introduces like the recognition of some of the processes. So I love this line sort of representing that, like this intention of like reconnecting. Like I didn't notice such a significant like part of that drawing.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah, we got KT Phoenix up on the board too. Yeah, would love to hear from you.
Well, I wanted to relay that in the chapter there were two different techniques used, and this one is where they ask, I can't remember if it was the women in the group discussion or the individual counseling, but they were asked to draw a family portrait. So this one and the other one where the person was being attacked and whatnot were their images of their family. That's what they thought of as a family portrait. The other, and the woman that drew the one where she was being attacked had no idea of the significance. But the body, I'm thinking maybe the right side of the hemisphere of the brain came through with what she actually remembered. The other technique they used in here was, I can't remember if it's TAT or TAP, but what it boiled down to is they created some images that were fairly neutral, might have some sort of emotional content of gloom or happiness or whatever, but fairly neutral. And they asked the people that were in treatment to, or maybe it's the children, at any rate, they asked them to write a story about what happened right before this image and then what happened right after the image. And I think it must have been children, because children with secure attachment might have mentioned that something bad happened before the image they were presented with, but then they would have a positive resolution afterward. So afterwards, everything was okay. But the ones who had been abused would have, the same or maybe a little bit more intense description of something bad happening before you got to the picture. And then on the other side of the picture, more bad stuff happened. So there was no positive resolution. And so they felt like this was a little bit better than saying a Rorschach test in order to get how these people reacted. And they could find out afterwards that, as the abused children had a different ending than the non-abused children, who were pretty much matched the same for age, gender, socioeconomic status, and all of that. The main difference between the two groups was the abuse. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to bring out those two different techniques that he talked about in the chapter.
Yeah, thanks for making that connection, because the very visual and storytelling, I loved how you mentioned the right hemisphere, sort of in a way getting around this really well practiced cognitive barrier between your thoughts and your feelings, and sort of building a railway through it by just letting your right hemisphere actually start telling the story through creativity. This is where I've seen countless links between creative expression and healing processes, because I think, like you said, the engagement of the right hemisphere sort of becomes this pathway for the body to get a platform for expressing these kind of latent feelings. And yeah, what a tool for a psychologist to put these kind of almost still life situation pictures in front of people and just saying tell me a story about what's happening in this picture, and it unveils their whole kind of thought process with all these clues that the counselor can follow and kind of create treatment and lead important discussions. So yeah, right hemisphere, a really big notice there and contribution to the idea of what's happening here.
And the actual act of drawing is something the body does. The body can come through and influence, and that's why I listed a lot of the therapies were getting in touch with the body in some way.
And that's blowing my mind right now, because it's you're literally handing a tool to your body to speak for it. Oh man. Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but how just what an apt way to describe the process. Well, yeah, thanks for those comments. Yeah, I mean, this is what I really super appreciate about the group experience with these books is these kind of nuggets. I wouldn't have been able to identify, myself. So I have this gift now of looking at these drawings with these two completely new and mind-blowing and important aspects. And oh yeah, we got Tom's hand up too there. Yeah, send the camera over to you, and love to hear what your thoughts are.
I'm not sure if I've got any nuggets. I'm the new guy. It would be kind of preposterous for me to blow into town here in episode 8 and get it all figured out. But you really set me up though, KT, because I was thinking about that too. And the right hemisphere supposedly is not going to be so judgmental. Why that creative stuff can just flow out, right? But I was thinking of the other side. I was taking, the body keeps score really literally, and it made me think of a box score. And we have scores, we have good scores, and with bad scores. My team scores a run, their team scores a run. Those are judgments. That was good, that was bad, that was good, that was bad. And I think at the other end, what KT was talking about was get the right hemisphere engaged so you can actually start to express the stuff that's in there. What if the body wasn't keeping score? What if the body wasn't saying this is good, this is bad? To me, the ultimate flow state or the ultimate, awakening maybe is that you just experience. And of course the body remembers it, but it doesn't keep score in a way that says this was good, this was bad, And I think what is Marilyn, we learned from the edge cases. So children who were abused, people that had the experiences that Marilyn had, they're extreme cases that we learn from. But all of us have been keeping score our whole damn life, even if it isn't just so big, just the tiniest thing. Just when someone looked at me with a funny look, that in some subtle way said my thought wasn't so great. I noticed that. My body remembered that. It remembered it as oh, that person gave me a funny look, and it's still in there. Mm-hmm. Doing something, and the life total of all of those, holy crap, it must just be amazing, So one way, by focusing on Marilyn's, I think in some ways we can forget the real message of this book, which is that we're always keeping score. We're always holding on to those things. And the real trauma isn't when, the IED explodes right next to you. It's that when an IED explodes a couple hundred yards away from you, thousands of times,
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I'm just thinking out loud here, Scott, but thank you so much for getting me thinking. And that's the right hemisphere, too. That really just says, let life come through the right hemisphere, and the left hemisphere's got to be part of it, but just shut the heck up, left hemisphere, and don't keep score. Don't say this was good or this was bad. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, really important perspective to share there, because I think that's a really important thing to kind of key in on, is that we're exploring really extreme life circumstances, which is where the research sort of spawns from, right? It's the people asking, right. But you're right. Everybody has a scoreboard, no matter what you've been through in life, and the good or bad judgment. This is something I'm still kind of practicing, which is looking back on experiences that I used to carry, as harmful things that happened, and sort of having that perspective of it's not really good or bad. It was just one of the experiences in my life, which sort of created the story of where we're at now in the present moment. And I know that sounds cliche, but I think when you can detach that good and bad judgment, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's both. That's what I mean, too, is that the times when you said, oh, I'm so cool because I did that, that's true. You did do that, and you were so cool, but that's still not you. That was a keeping score. So, just notice that you did good that time, you move on to the next one. The good, your body's holding on to the good ones. Who knows? Maybe they're a burden, too. I don't know. I just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you can, reach the freedom, from these, kind of play-by-plays that we, carry these highlights of our sports game of life, then you can reach the present moment. Yeah. And now you're fully here, in this moment, free to experience it and feel what you're feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying. And also, Scott, here, I'm just thinking out loud, but maybe what could be the danger in keeping score of the good ones and not processing them and separating yourself from them is you get hooked on it, It's oh my God, what am I if people aren't respecting my work, or I'm not getting good feelings because I'm such a contributor and whatnot, Whatever your source of good scores came from, when it isn't there, then where are you, So anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I noticed, looks like we got someone chiming in from the stream here. Oh, Rhonda, yeah, welcome back, Rhonda. Yeah, we're talking about CAT. And this is where I struggle to pronounce this, but thematic apperception test. I think I said that right, the thematic. Yeah. So you were right, KT, it is CAT. Yeah, thanks, Rhonda. Thanks for posting a message and letting us know that you're there. And yeah, I also want to thank Haya for the recognition too that I had some emotional feelings about chapter 8, and kind of to share where it comes from, because I do feel guilty, and this might be my own version of what they were talking about in group therapy, where this is just where I'm at right now, and I feel I need to apologize for it. But I've experienced life and kind of the safety of a white male body. I wasn't kind of in the probability of these kind of scenarios, not that they don't happen, but I wasn't born into the demographic where this is a scourge, and I found I started dating a lot later in life. I was already in college when I discovered, how to try to have a relationship. But everyone I have ever dated shared a story of assault with me, and it still blows my mind to this day. And they've shared with me, details and people and timings. One partner I had couldn't really tell me, but they wrote it in a letter and
Mm.
Gave me the letter to read so I could understand, what happened. So, although I can't share the experience, and I feel guilty and unqualified to kind of have a stage, to talk about the topic. But I have had connection to it through, people I've loved. And if there was a way, like Dr. Vanderkolk says, that we could get this worldwide so that nobody has to kind of fix all these generational traumas where these things come from, and so they can't happen behind closed doors. Like I want to get there. I hope we can. And KT, I see your name back up on the board too. Did something come out?
Yeah, I wanted to say that other kinds of trauma or lesser kinds of trauma can take this same path. In my case, I was raised on military bases, and we moved a lot. As my dad did that a lot to build his career, so to speak. And so about every year or two, I would lose all of my friends, my house, my community, my school, and go somewhere else and be the new kid on the block and be in a new house and a new community and a new school and new teachers where I didn't know where all the resources were. And that happened really often to me growing up. I think my parents spent their 26th anniversary in their 26th house, and I was there for most of that. And I didn't really see it as trauma. I saw the plus side of it because it's the military gung-ho mission of saving the U.S. and protecting the U.S. and all that was a good thing we were doing. And that was what was emphasized. And when I got older and got some therapy, I realized there was definitely a downside to that kind of lifestyle, and that it was stuck, inside physically. It was stuck in lots of different areas, in even weird ways. Like every few years, I'd get a wanderlust. I wanted to move. I needed to pick up. Everything was boring, and I needed someplace new. And my husband had a neat technique. He would just take me on a long week or two vacation. And then when we got back, I was fine. I didn't want to pack up all my books and actually do a move. But it got that sort of wanderlust itch out of my system and let me experience something new, temporarily, and then come back home to a safe situation. So what I guess I'm trying to say overall is there's a lot of different ways to get trauma. And this book focused on one. But there are a lot of other traumas in our background that have affected us going forward. And so I don't want anyone to feel like that because they didn't have that kind of horrendous experience, that they didn't have something that affected them.
Yeah.
And, something that they could work on and feel better about. And they may or may not remember it. I didn't remember all the different parts of the trauma of moving around. I realized my memory was all a jumble. I couldn't remember what memories went where. And so I went through and did a itinerary, if you will, and got pictures of the houses that we lived in and what ages my parents and my siblings were and what significant events happened. And I realized the grass mats that I thought we had in Florida, we actually had in the Philippines. and other little things that kept teasing out and giving me a more stable image of my background, of my memories of growing up. And so there are a lot of different ways to work on this stuff. I just wanted to make sure people realize you could have other kinds of trauma than what is described here, and that lesser kinds of trauma can still be important and that you need to deal with.
My point
That's
too,
just
and that
what I
everyone's qualified to speak on it too, Scott. Everybody, like everyone in the whole human race, is qualified to speak on this. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's something I struggle with, so some encouragement helps there. Appreciate it.
And you did great holding space for the women that you dated that told you these stories. That's very touching. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for also bringing the important messaging that trauma is not a competition. Like you don't get a trophy for having the most horrendous experience that anyone could have. What Dr. Vanderkolk, I think, presents in this book is that trauma is a body reaction to your experience. So it doesn't really, the experience almost isn't important. We're going to talk about EMDR a little bit in this book, which the whole philosophy of EMDR is it doesn't matter what happened to you. What we're ultimately trying to do is retrain the body to not have this fight, flight, freeze, fawn experience. So no matter what you went through, if your body processed that as a lack of safety and you chronically begin to go into fight or flight, like Tom said, it doesn't have to be an IUD or being held at gunpoint or sexual assault. It can be transferring to 12 different schools in the 12 years that you went to school, and being able to appreciate that that's a pretty exciting life, but also that you lose your friends every year and you have to explore a whole new place every year, and the unique kind of challenges that come with that as well. So really well said that trauma, the importance of facing trauma is really recognizing that the body needs to kind of reconnect with your rational side, and to have that mindful caretaker, so to speak, to be I heard that you don't feel safe right now, but trust me, we got this. Just roll with me, or let me help lead. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but I'm just excited by the way you put that. And I think I see a couple more. Oh yeah, Rhonda added. Yeah, there's a little bit of latency in the chat messaging from the stream, but we do eventually see it. So Rhonda says trauma is the one that is harmful. Goodness scores equip us to handle the bad. I see right, the scales. You got to balance it. Good events. Children don't know how to find resources, so trauma, even small, can be more impactful and damaging. Absolutely. And what's one of the hardest things children go through is going to school, right? How many things happen at school that are, humiliating or threatening. So it doesn't have to be these big, acute, horrendous experiences. It can be what some might kind of label as why does that bother you? And this is another aspect of it too that I was hoping to talk on, was that the securely attached, children that grow into securely attached adults, they don't always have the intensity of the experience, because maybe something, totally terrible happened to them as well, but they have the support network. They know, something's wrong and that they should ask for help, where somebody insecurely attached might, switch to feeling like I deserve this. My parents taught me that I need to put others before myself. So if somebody's abusing me, it's just, that's the way, life is. And, I went through a period of life where I would see somebody securely attached, and I'd just be like, "How dare you? How dare you have such a good life?" I laugh about it now, but like I was really, I was really kind of miffed about that growing up. Like what do I need to do to touch that feeling and that way of life? So I think that's what can also be hard for somebody with trauma, is that if you have a family full of securely attached people, or you have securely attached friends, they don't understand what you're struggling with. So you have this kind of "what's wrong with me" way of seeing it, where it's really a what happened to you, and finding the validation that it was an experience that did change your body, and how to treat that. So yeah, validation is and understanding, and not competing and ranking and judging, like all of that's really important. So thanks for messaging that. And let's see, we're coming up right at the 90-minute mark, where we like to kind of have our event time here. But as my good friend Tom always says, nobody's coming to kick us out. So if there's any more comments, anybody's been holding back. Also, welcome T. I saw that you were able to find us. I'm really glad to see you, and your custom Bang heart emojis. I always really super appreciate those too. So yeah, I'll just do like a going once, going twice.
Scott, I just noticed that a friend of mine, Gus, just dropped in at the very end. So just before you go, why don't you let Gus know what this event has been, and if maybe he'll want to come back next week? Say hi, Gus. Are you here?
Hey,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm walking around the world. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me find you guys. Sorry.
Just let him know. We've been going for 90 minutes, Gus. So, but just so you know, if you want to check it out, what is this event about, Scott?
Yeah, we meet every Thursday night. We're going through a book review of a very famous book called "The Body Keeps the Score" by Dr. Vanderkolk. And we're just doing like a group discussion of it, chapter by chapter, Thursday nights. The book is very oriented towards trauma research by one of the leading researchers in the field. So lots of commentary on childhood trauma, links to adult autoimmune discomfort, advice and techniques on how to find help for traumatic experiencing, and the way that it impacts lives and bodies. So if that does sound interesting, we'll be back here next Thursday, and would love to have you. And Key as well.
Let me know. Yeah, I love this book, and it's going to be awesome to share it all. Thank you.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Thanks,
Hey, nice
Scott.
to see you, Gus. I got it.
Yeah, thank you.
For a while, I'm probably gonna take off now. But anyway, nice to see you. Hope things are going well.
I'm
Just
going to turn the
remind-
volume back on mingle mode.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
No, sorry.
Reminding
Thanks again, Scott.
people to
Thanks,
RSVP on Bridgemakers if you find value in this experience, so we can keep the event going.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Have a good
Sounds
evening,
good.
everybody.
Thanks.
You
Good
well.
night. There, I got the audio on mingle mode now, so we're not blasting each other out.
Yes, Scott. Good job with a tough topic.
Thanks. I was actually really nervous about tonight.
Well, anybody
Yeah.
would be. That is a really tough topic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just so unfair. It breaks my heart whenever I come kind of face to face with it, like at this level of intensity. It's just like, gosh darn it, Like,
Yeah, but needed to go through it, and I think you did a good job.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and thanks for participating. I really love your insight. It adds a lot to the topic for me.
I appreciate that.
Like I think
Mm-hmm.
VR has actually been like a little bit of my creative outlet, like for
Mm-hmm.
the right hemisphere. Yeah.
Oh, you're right. And because it's 3 dimensions, maybe more involved.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I never thought of like my keyboard as like something I'm giving my body.
Yeah, and you reach for the colors and shapes that come out of your emotions, really. What seems right
Mm,
to you.
mm,
I do some beaded jewelry sometimes, and it feels like I'm building in 3 dimensions and different textures, and it just not a whole lot of design to it, but just reaching out for what seems to go together well.
yeah, I love the project that you put together to sort of put a timeline to like all your family photos and there one of the things I did a couple times in VR is I took like some of my favorite like old family photos and like blew them up like the size of
Mm,
like a building in VR. And it's like you can see all these like things in the background that you didn't really
yeah.
notice until it's like this Godzilla sized photo. And
I
that brought
was
back a lot of memories.
I was in a 360 puzzle app and accidentally grabbed some family pictures from the 70s. And it
Mm,
does the same thing. It like puts it up like it's on an IMAX type of
yeah.
thing as you're selecting it. And what struck me was the facial expressions on my sisters. I think they were a whole lot more unhappy than I had
Mm,
realized back
yeah.
then. So I had not seen it before. I was just too self centered or something. And so it just really opened my eyes to how long they had been unhappy with the situation. So, I mean, they kind of exploded on me in when we were settling the estate, after my dad died. And it just
Mm,
um, helped me to understand, how long it had been going on for them. And they had just sort of held things back
mm,
for the sake of my parents, I think, rather than being
yeah.
honest at the time where we could have maybe fixed it a little more easily. So when you blow up a
Mm.
picture that big, it can be interesting and revelatory and what's the word? Therapeutic is the other word I was hunting for.
Yeah, like the immersion. Like when I had this picture of me like standing in my bedroom, which like when I looked at it, just as a picture, like I always kind of just noticed myself, but when I blew it up, it was like all the toys and the
Yeah.
wallpaper and like, the little hole in the wall that was always there. Like these things pop out and you're like, whoa, like I hadn't thought about those things in so long. That was an interesting experience. I had no idea that you had moved like so many times. Like I knew you moved a lot because of your father's assignments, but I didn't know it was like every year. That's
Well,
incredible.
we would be someplace 2 years, then other years we would move twice, in the
Mm,
same year. And Dad would take us to some um, training session. Like there was one on how to be a squadron officer. There was one that he went to that was real prestigious called Fighter Weapons School. It's kind of like the Air
mm.
Force version of Top Gun. And he took us with
Wow.
him because that's out at Nellis at Las Vegas, Nevada. So he just took me out of school soon or brought me to school late. And
Mm,
so I was not only the new kid in the block, but the teacher was mad because here was another
yeah.
student coming in like a month after classes started. Um, but yeah, so it was quite interesting to go through all that. Plus, living in the military culture, very different from civilian culture.
Mm, I imagine.
And yeah, other weird traumas. Like one time, I remembered that I don't know,
Oh
preschool, early
shoot.
grade school. Oops, what?
I really forgot that I was I'm still streaming, so I really
Oops.
apologize. I totally forgot to to turn the stream off. I'm embarrassed. My fault. Let me just take care of that really quick. So
Or,
um here. There we go.